Mr. President, I rise to encourage the Senate to seek quick action on the Sandy relief package that has been long overdue. I know that the Majority Leader is committed to bringing it to the floor as soon as we can get some type of agreement with the other side of the aisle, and I hope that agreement can come quickly because a recovery that is delayed, as this already has been significantly delayed, is a recovery that very likely can fail. And we cannot afford for one of the biggest engines of the national economy, which is the Northeast, to fail in its recovery, not only for the sake of the Northeast, but for the entire country. And I appreciate the Majority Leader's steadfast commitment to provide that relief as quickly as possible here in the Senate, but time is a-wasting. We're already here on Wednesday, and I am concerned that we will lose another week before we in fact can seek passage, which will then go to the President and then move on towards beginning having the resources flow to communities across the Northeast who have languished since Sandy had its toll. There's no excuse for delay, Mr. President. We already had the delay in the House. They could have passed the package that the Senate passed in a transparent process that took the Appropriations Committee on both sides scrubbing the bill, that was brought before the Senate in a fashion that we like to see the Senate work over. I believe it was 25 some odd amendments that were considered, a full vetting of the legislation, a strong bipartisan vote at the end of that process, sent to the House, and unfortunately it languished and died at the end of the last Congress. Now, the House has acted in a different fashion, and so while I am happy at this point, Mr. President, to accept the House's version, even though I do believe that the Senate version is superior in a variety of ways, getting passage here of the House version so it can be sent to the President and so that we can get relief to citizens in the Northeast is critically important. You know, I look at what the package the House has, and I say to myself, $50.7 billion in resources, in addition to the flood insurance package that already passed, will allow our residents and small businesses who have been waiting so long to recover and begin to rebuild. It will show them finally that they have a strong partner in the federal government. Finally, someone is there for them, as we have been whenever and wherever disaster has struck our fellow Americans throughout this nation. I would have obviously preferred the Senate bill, which is stronger, but we can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We need to get assistance to the victims of Sandy as quickly as possible, and this is a vehicle that gets us to that goal. Now, while the House bill significantly reduced assistance in a couple of areas, including fishery disasters and community development funding, which I think in those respects may stunt the recovery of an important industry along our coast, and could potentially siphon off billions in CDBG funding that's badly needed right now in New York and New Jersey by amplifying what disasters are eligible for it. I'm pleased to say that we protected the overwhelming amount of CDBG funding from the Senate bill, about $16 billion. And while not everything we needed, it will now be spread even thinner across more disasters. We can certainly help many communities recover and rebuild as we can, because time is of the essence. There is a fierce urgency of now. We have many business owners that I've spoken to who said to me, Senator, I'm at a critical juncture. I don't know whether or not I can reopen. If if the government's going to give me no assistance, then I likely won't. Because adding more debt, even in terms of long-term, low-interest loans, is still debt. And I took out debt to start this business, or I took out debt to be able to get through the Great Recession. But I don't really have the option to take out more debt without some direct assistance, like a grant, that can help jumpstart my business, get those individuals I had employed reemployed once again, and create an opportunity for our community. That decision right now for those businesses, which are life and death decisions, are pending, hanging by the will of the Senate to act. I'm also pleased that the package that the House passed recognizes what I've been saying all along. The funding that the Army Corps of Engineers efforts is critical to rebuilding coastal communities, and particularly New Jersey's weakened coastal defenses. We are at the lowest of our immune system as a coastal state. And we already see the biting cold. It's cold throughout the Capitol today. That's how cold it is outside. Well, think about those residents who don't have a place to call home, those fellow Americans who don't have a place to call home because they don't have the wherewithal to get their home back in a way in which they can once again be able to live there, raise their families there, meet their challenges as a family in a warm, nurturing environment. That doesn't exist for many of our fellow Americans because they don't have the wherewithal to decide whether they're going to get the type of assistance that can help them rebuild that home. That is pending. And part of that is the Army Corps of Engineers' ability to re-engineer our beaches in a way that ultimately provides not just for the potential of tourism, which is a $37 billion industry in our state, but even more importantly, for the protection of lives, for the protection of property, for the protection against repetitive losses. That's what's going to happen when we get this money to the Army Corps of Engineers to be able to rebuild our coastal defenses. This package would give Jersey Shore residents and businesses the comfort of knowing that they'd be better protected in the future than they have been in the past. It also includes $13 billion in critical funding I sought to help restore our transportation systems. It would allow New Jersey Transit, for example, to repair extensive damage from the storm and allow the agency to build facilities on higher ground to prevent future flood damage, a common sense option. A common sense option when we think about fiscal responsibility. Why would we rebuild only to the very same status that was allowed to be flooded in the first place and caused all of the damage that the government would pay for? This passage of this potential package from the House would allow the Port Authority to finish repairing the PAF stations and harden electrical equipment to prevent future damages. The package that would come to the floor, if we could get agreement, would include necessary policy reforms that I have supported that will streamline recovery efforts and improve FEMA's public assistance programs, critical to a successful recovery. These reforms would allow us to rebuild what is in place before the storm stronger and better. Again, important in terms of the end results, important in terms of the fiscal responsibility to ensure that we rebuild in such a way that we don't end up with repetitive damage that would be more costly to the government. And it would allow a third-party dispute resolution process for major projects, because some of the history that we have, particularly in Katrina from Senator Landrieu's experience, was that the reality of not having a dispute resolution process ultimately forestalled recoveries in critical projects to that state and those communities. And also for coverage of child care costs related to disaster recovery through FEMA individual assistance. Those are all critical elements. So without going through all the provisions of the House bill, let me just say we need to pass this relief package. People are suffering. They are waiting for certainty in rebuilding desperately their lives and their businesses and communities trying to get back on their feet need this aid, even if it's late and even if it's ultimately longer than other disasters have had to wait. As I pointed out in the past, I think it was in 10 days or so, 60 billion flowed to Katrina. We are nearly 3 months since the worst disaster on the East Coast in terms of a natural disaster has taken place. The people of the Northeast, the people of my state of New Jersey, and our neighbors in New York desperately need this funding. And it's time to help these fellow Americans. It's time to do it now. It is time to do it this week. It's going to take time for this recovery to take place. And the longer we delay, the greater the chance of failure that we, in fact, create. I think we want success, not failure. I think we want to understand as an institution, as I have said again many times, that this is the United States of America. That means that we respond to the challenges, the disasters that take place in other parts of the country. We do it hopefully more expeditiously than this, and at the same time, we stand by our fellow Americans so that they can reclaim their lives, reclaim their commitments to their communities, reclaim the opportunity to reopen their businesses, to contribute to those communities, to our state, to this nation, to our society. And so I strongly urge our colleagues who have some reticence to agree to moving forward on a Sandy bill to come to common ground with us, to come to an ability to move this relief package. No American should have to languish months after a disaster to get help. That should not be the standard. The hallmark of our response should be an intelligent but expeditious response to the consequences of a disaster that any American faces. That's the tradition we have had. It's a tradition we should maintain. It's a tradition that, unfortunately, in this particular instance, has not been a reality. It's a tradition that I hope we can ultimately embrace once again this week in pushing through finally a Sandy package that can move to the President for signature and relief to our communities.